Hey, fat fish heads! It's time for another edition of the hottest new podcast on all platforms, Fat Fish. Sit back and strap yourself in for the wildest ride on the open seas. Now, flap your fins for the fabulous Fat Fish brothers, Eric Fish Snyder and Brad Grunny Grunberg, a.k.a. Snacks.
We got a Tony Apettisano on there. You might want to take a Snickers bar because you don't look like Brad, you know.
It'll take more than a Snickers bar for me to get as big as Brad. God bless him.
Oh, well, we don't know where Brad is. He'll show up. He never misses this opportunity. Thank you for coming on, Fat Fish. Tony Apettisano, his legacy is that he was a manager for Frank Sinatra and Don Rickles. Do you think he has stories about these two legends? Tony, how did you get your start?
I was an entertainer, a jazz singer, and a musician, and I was working various clubs. I caught the tail end of the great nightclub era in New York, and I was fortunate to have played like Barney Googles and Jimmy Weston's, and I played Jimmy Weston's with Maynard Ferguson, believe it or not, and I even worked the Copacabana Lounge, and I heard about this club on an album that Sinatra did in 1965, Live at the Sands with the Basie Band. And he kept talking about Jilly's this and Jilly's West and Jilly and Jilly and Jilly. I said, well, you know, I was in high school then, junior high school. And I figured, well, you know, when I get old enough to start hanging out in clubs, I got to check this place out. So I did. I went in and I befriended Jilly's older brother, another Frank, believe it or not, who ran the club in Jilly's absence. And I went in the afternoon, and I went in a couple times, and he finally, Frank says to me, "You're always in a tuxedo." He says, "What do you do?" I said, "Well, I'm an entertainer, and I play various clubs around the city and everything else." He said, "Well, geez, you're working tonight, right?" I said, "Yeah." He said, "Well, if you get done early enough," he says, "why don't you come back and sit in with the guys? I'd love to hear what you do." And I did, and he was impressed, and he said, "I got to introduce you to my brother when he comes back to town." And that in and of itself was a funny event. Jilly was quite a character, God bless him. He was the king of malaprompt, although it wasn't something that he did consciously. His command of the English language was a little challenged, I should say. And I knew that he had a detached retina in one eye, but I didn't know which one, okay? So the club was really jammed this particular night, and they were three deep at the bar, and opposite the bar, they had a wall of photographs of outtakes of Sinatra movies and stuff like that. So I'm waiting for Jilly to come down from his apartment upstairs, and there was another guy waiting to meet Jilly as well. And he finally comes downstairs, and Uncle Frank says, "Jilly, this is Tony Apettisano, Tony, the kid that I wanted you to meet. And how you doing, kid? How you doing, kid? Nice to meet you, Jilly. It's a pleasure." And then he introduced him to the other guy. And I'm sipping my drink, and I got my back to the bar, and I'm looking at all these pictures. And Jilly says, so how you doing? You working or what? Man, I didn't say anything to him. I'm still sipping my drink. So you staying busy, or what's going on with you? And I didn't say anything to him. So he slapped me on the shoulder. He says, "What are you, thief? I'm talking to you." I said, "Jilly, I knew you had a bad eye. I didn't know if it was this one. I thought maybe you was talking to him." He says, "I love this kid. I love this kid." So that's how it started. And when he heard me perform, after we got to know each other a couple of months, he said, "You know, you'd be a good fit for the old man. You and he would get along really great." He says, your musicality, and you grew up in the same way, and you have a lot of the same background and this and that." And Frank was about to enter his self-imposed retirement, where he decided to walk away from the business, spend more time with his family and friends. And in later years, he told me that he actually was trying to evaluate whether he was, at that point in time, relevant to people of my age and my generation. And according to him, I had a minor hand in convincing him that he did, because I kept bringing around other entertainers of my age, and they were hanging on his every word, just thrilled to be in his company. That coupled with boatloads of letters, he decided to come out of retirement about 2 years into it. We met December 8th, 1972. I was all of 21 years old, and he was about to be 57. And it was a very interesting night. He came into town to hear Frank Jr., who was appearing at the Rainbow Room at Rockefeller Center, and he went in to see his son, and that's the night that we met. We went back to the club after the show, and Jilly introduced me, and he closed the club early, and he says, "Go get your axe out of your car, my guitar." He says, I want the old man to hear you do what you do." And I said, "Oh, geez, I wish I hadn't drank so much Jack Daniels tonight." And he closed the club right at 4 o'clock, and Frank moved up from his booth in the corner of the room and was sitting opposite me at the piano. And it was just myself, Joe Patrone on piano, and Lou Berryman on bass. And we were playing tunes, and about 6 tunes into it, Joe Patrone says, "Hey, Tone, why don't you do something by yourself, a la Joe Pass or Bucky Pizzarelli is?" Okay. So I was thinking, Frank did an album with Joe Beam. I know there's a particular tune that he really liked called How Insensitive. And I started to play How Insensitive, and maybe 12 bars into it, Frank starts humming. I swear to God, I almost dropped the guitar. All right. Then he goes from humming to singing. Now I'm accompanying him. And we did the tune, played it out, ended perfectly as though we had rehearsed it. And he looked over at me and he says, "That was pretty good, kid." I said, "Thank you, Mr. Sinatra." I said, I'm no Al Viola, but Al Viola was his longtime guitarist. And he turned to Jill. He says, "Oh, who the hell is this kid? How does he know who Al Viola is?" But we hit it off that night. I was there till almost 7 o'clock in the morning playing music and hanging out with him. It was the beginning of a 26-year friendship.
Yeah, I was old enough. My wife, for my 30th birthday, took me to the Universal Amphitheater, and Rickles opens up for Sinatra. And today, of all the concerts I've seen, it's number one. I remember one time I went to go see George Carlin in concert, and he opens. Remember, the great George Carlin. He walks out on stage, Tone, and he looks at the audience, and he's quiet. And he's always that awkward silence for like 3 minutes, and then the first thing he says is, "Do you think that Frank Sinatra and Elvis Presley ever got laid when they went to Las Vegas?" And everyone just starts laughing. And you know what? I think we have someone here that wants to talk to you. Well, oh my God, look who showed up.
No,
look who showed up, Tony.
Hey!
Oh, geez.
Where have you guys been? We gotta
just
get
hanging out
Tony.
at the bar.
Can we get Tony back closer, like in the middle? Can we do that, Fish?
Tony, yeah. Tony, you kind of move yourself to your left. Your left, Tony.
Let me see.
And get yourself in there. Hi, Brad.
How you doing there, Fish? There you go. Now there's gorgeous Tony-o.
So Brad, I got Tony started talking about how he met Sinatra and how he, he's playing the guitar and Sinatra starts humming. So you want to join in on this?
I'm just happy to be here. I heard, yes, I heard everything you said, Tony-o. Let me ask you this, Tony.
Yeah.
Did you ever think you were going to be a manager? Did you ever think that you would be a manager for Sinatra, Rickles? And do you miss it today?
What's really strange, Brad, is that I something else I shared with Frank as I was telling Eric. My father was dead set against me being in the entertainment industry. He was overly protective Italian father, and but I was determined to do it because it was so confounding. I said, I'm gonna lick this industry. It was either that or I actually took 2 years of law. I was going to be a lawyer, and I gave up my performing career as soon as I played out my contracts at Harrah's in Lake Tahoe and Caesars in Vegas, because the music industry took such they made a big left away from the stuff that I was doing, the Great American Songbook and jazz and that kind of stuff. And it was went to disco, and from disco to heavy metal, from heavy metal to grunge. And I said, you know what? I love music far too much to compromise my musical integrity to do that stuff. And I got out of that end of the business and I started producing television. But because of my relationship with Jilly, Jilly was helping me line up talent with people with whom I did not have a relationship. I produced 8 black tie galas for Bob Hope. And yeah, I did a lot. I did a comedy series for the BBC, believe it or not, in 1986 called Stand Up America. And the concept was they wanted to pick my brain. I don't know why me. They wanted to pick my brain. There was a comedian by the name of Jasper Carrot, who was a big star over there. And the concept was that they wanted to introduce to Great Britain who I thought was going to be the biggest names in comedy in the next 10 years. So I camped out in all the clubs and I made a list and I signed them all to do the show. Jerry Seinfeld, Rita Rudner, Bob Saget, Gilbert Gottfried, Bobcat Goldthwait, Marsha Warfield, Bobby Slayton.
Jesus.
A whole slew of really great people. And that's when Jilly said, you know, you got such a great eye for talent. He says, and you know so much about the business yourself coming from that side of the fence. He said, you know, maybe you'd be good at handling people. And so we started to manage people like Joey Villa, Barbara McNair, and people like that. And again, because I was spending so much time, and at this point in time, I was already friends with Frank a good 12 years or so. And Jilly lived right around the corner from Frank. And he closed the club in Manhattan and moved to California full time. And he lived right around the corner from Frank. So when I was down there with Jilly, every single time I was down there, it was inevitable that we'd be going around the corner and spending 8, 10, 12 hours with Frank. And so then Jilly got himself into a little bit of a problem. He trusted the wrong people, and he got into a problem with the federal government. He got under indictment. It's a whole mess. He got screwed, actually. But there were things he couldn't do, places he couldn't go. And Frank would say to me, listen, if you're not shooting a show such and such a time, it would be great if you could come with me here or there. And that's how it loosely started. And did I ever envision that? No. But it felt like a good fit for the reasons that Jilly suggested. I knew.
Can I ask you a question, though, Tony?
I knew what entertainers wanted, what they needed, and why they needed it. So there was never any pushback. So
right. Before Brad came on, you said something that just struck me, that Sinatra comes out of retirement. He's 57 and you're 22. It's almost like my favorite year, the Peter O'Toole movie, when the young kids got to walk he's the ingenue to this great star. How intimidated were you by him, or did he take you like under his wing and made you feel real comfortable?
He did. I was blown away by that. He just, like I said, we had so much in common. I hate to pat myself on the back. However, he was actually a fan of my singing ability. And as a matter of fact, on his 20th wedding anniversary, he was having a party al fresco, as they say. He retook his vows to Barbara at a church in Malibu, Our Lady of Malibu. And then we went back to his house, if you want to call it that, on Broad Beach Road. And he used to laugh at it because I'd say, well, so what, we're going to eat out in the yard? I said, well, he says, the yard? He said, well, wait, you still in Brooklyn or what? Well, Frank, what do you want to call it? It's the backyard. It's out there. Anyway, he knew that I had hired a trio, Frankie Randall, who was another guy that started his career at Jilly's, and Jim DiGiulio on bass, who used to play on the Mike Douglas show, and Ron Anthony, who was a great guitar player, played with George Shearing. And so Frank says to me the night before, we're sitting having a couple of drinks, and he says, now listen, Frankie Randall's going to sing a little bit tomorrow. He says, but the only 2 singers that I want to hear tomorrow at that party is Steve Lawrence and you.
Wow.
And I said, Frank,
wow.
I'm flattered. I said, however, Barbara Streisand's going to be at the party. Peggy Lee's going to be at the party. Jerry Vale's going to be at the party. She says, I don't give a shit. I only want to hear Steve and you.
That isn't. Was Frank did being his manager, did he want you around all the time? Did you have free time for yourself? That
Well,
kind of thing.
the good part of it was that as with Rickles, our relationship started out as a very close friendship. And technically, Frank really didn't give people titles unless, you had to fill out papers to go internationally. What's your position in his world? Blah, blah, blah. I mean, Elliot Wiseman was doing a lot of booking and stuff like that and was the manager. I was part of the management team. And I only became part of the management team formally after Jilly passed away. Well, Jilly got killed in a car accident, as you probably know.
Oh, no.
And that's when he said to me, the night of Jilly's funeral, he said, listen, we both lost probably one of the best, if not the best friend we're ever going to have. He says, how do you feel about making this thing permanent between you and me? He says, I know you're doing other stuff, and I said, he says, I'm sensing some apprehension. And I said, well, Frank, it's been my experience that sometimes when you start mixing money and other people's jealousies into an equation, things get derailed. And I value our relationship far too much to jeopardize it. And he looked at me for what seemed like an hour. It was only about 2 minutes because he had that X-ray look. And he says, okay, I hear you. But here's my take on that. I said, okay. He said, as far as I'm concerned, I'm going to clean up the language. There are only two people in the world that can screw up what we have. It's you and me, and it ain't going to be me. I said, you got a deal. We shook hands, and that was it.
That's what probably Jilly would have wanted, for you to take, pass the torch to you and to take care of Frank. I saw Frank. I took my whole family to the Greek. I saw Pia Zadora open, Don Rickles middle, and Frank Sinatra headline with his son running the band. It was. Then I went the next night to Irvine Meadows with my best friend to see him again. It is something I will never, ever forget. Unbelievable charisma. What a man. And also, I heard a story, maybe it was from you, Tonio, how charitable he was. In New York City, he was in his limo, and the rain was pouring down, and there was poor lady was selling flowers. And he said, stop the limo. He bought all the flowers and then went to a hospital and gave it to the kids and the people. Is that a true story?
Absolutely. And the PS of that story is that we were supposed to be meeting Barbara and a girlfriend of hers for dinner at a restaurant. And we showed up about 30 minutes late. So when we walked in, Barbara gave him a little bit of a look. And he said, sweetheart, it's not my fault. It's Tony's fault. The man is a drunk. We had to stop at 4 different bars on the way here. Thank you, Frank. I appreciate it. Thank you very much.
Oh my goodness. Why did Frank like Don Rickles so much? I mean, Don Rickles got away with stuff that nobody would get away with. Why did that happen?
Don was very disarming and honest, and Frank absolutely revered that in him. I mean, he had a sense of where the line was that you didn't cross, but yet he could disarm anyone, no matter who it was, from Princess Margaret to you name it. That's just the way he was. And, I mean, I don't know if you know the story, where Jilly actually found Rickles playing and knocking around in some joints in the city. And when they were down in Florida, Rickles was working in a place down in Florida. And he said to Frank, we're going to go see this guy tonight. And Frank said, who? He said, never mind. I know you'll enjoy him. So he walked into this place and only sat like 100 people. And Rickles was on stage, and he looked and he saw Frank walk in. And he said, oh my God, ladies and gentlemen, look who just walked into the club. And they all turned around, they looked at Frank. And he says, Frank, be yourself. Turn around and hit somebody. Thankfully, Frank laughed. or as Rickles said, if he hadn't laughed, I'd be on a hook in New Jersey.
Oh my goodness, that is fantastic. Did you manage anybody else beside Frank and
You know, I there's an actor who you met, Brad, Michael Guarnera,
Oh, yeah.
who is phenomenal talent. As a matter of fact, he just came back from just before the strike. He spent a month over in England shooting a role in the movie version of Wicked. John Chu brought him over there. And he went from being a client, my only client by choice, to being my business partner in our production company, Winbrook Entertainment. And he's a hell of a producer. He's come a long way, but he's still a very talented actor. And he's like a younger brother to me now. We're family.
Very nice guy. Very, very genuine.
Yeah.
Wow, I can't believe we have Tony O on, Fish. Is this unbelievable?
Well, we are Fat Fish 58. That is Brad Grunny Grunberg. I am the Fish Man, and we are seen on Roku, DBTV, Facebook, YouTube, and our listening outlets are on Podbean.com, and we are blessed to have the legendary Tony O. Tony, tell Brad what you were telling me before he came on about Rickles and your name.
Well, when we met, I had just signed a contract. I was doing an engagement at the Cal Naval Lodge on the North Shore of Lake Tahoe, which at one point Sinatra owned. And anyway, we made so much noise that I was able to construct a deal with Harris on the South Shore, a 3-year deal, 4 months a year, 1 month each season. And so the first gig that I had, Rickles was there, and he was working with this new group at the time called Sister Sledge.
Oh, I love them.
Yeah.
They were opening for him. And so on my night off, because it was a 6-nighter, on my night off, I told the entertainment director I'd like to go in and see Rickles. He said, great, I'll set you up, sit at the entertainer's table. And as you know, there was a spot in Don's show toward the end where he would introduce various people in the audience. And so the entertainment director gave him my name to introduce. Now, my full name, my last name is Opedisano. Okay. Jilly is the one who hung Tony O on me.
Oh.
He said, who the hell's going to remember how to pronounce Opedisano? I said, look who's talking. Your mother named you Ermenegildo, and she starts calling you Jilly. Look who's talking. Anyway, the only other Ermenegildo I ever heard of was Zania, the clothing manufacturer. Anyway, so I'm in the audience, and Rickles is introducing various people, and he's looking down at this piece of paper, and he says, and ladies and gentlemen, we have a young entertainer in the audience. I'd like to give him a very warm welcome. He's under contract. He's working here at the State Line Cabaret, making a lot of noise. Please give a very warm welcome to Tony Hop in the Sauna. How the hell do you? So he says, where are you? I said, I'm right here, Mr. Rickles. He said, well, stand up, young man. I stood up. He says, how do you pronounce this name? I said, it's Opedisano, sir. He said, that's Italian. I said, it's Sicilian. And he dropped the microphone and he went like this. He picked up the microphone and he says, so where are you from, young man? I said, I'm originally from Brooklyn. Oh, Jesus. He like this with his hands up. And he invited me to go backstage after the show, and we started talking about this and that. We found out that we had Jilly and Frank in common as friends, and it started a relationship that lasted 37 years, 24 of which I represented him.
And we
met in 1980.
Yeah. And
starting in December of 1992, I started to represent him. And it was funny, but it all had to do with Frank, that too. The Desert Inn was having a big bash celebrating Sinatra's 77th birthday, 2 sevens, roll the dice, that kind of thing. And so I said to Frank, so who do you want to have on the show with you? Because they were flying in all the magazine shows from LA, Current Affair, and all of those shows, and they have a plane load of celebrities at Frank's request. The usual suspects: Gregory Peck and Kirk Douglas and Sophia Loren and Jack Lemmon.
Wow.
And I said, so who do you want to have open the show for you? And I mentioned a couple of people who will remain nameless at this point. And he said, no, Tony, if I want polite laughter, I'll hire Mort Saul. He says to me, I want someone who's going to create some tumult. I says, okay. And he says, I got an idea. I said, yeah. He says, how about Bullethead, which was one of his loving names for Don. Okay. Yeah. And I said, well, I think he's under contract to Steve Wynn at the Golden Nugget. He says, yeah, but Steve Wynn's looking to close that room. He said, but besides, you asked me who I wanted. I told you, make it happen. So through various machinations, me calling Steve Wynn and telling him, listen, if you buy Don out of his contract, he won't appear for the next 3 engagements that you have, and you'll save a lot of money, and you can close the room in a year and a half early. And he says, okay, what were you thinking? And I said, well, how about 80 cents on a dollar? He says, how about 70? How about 75? Sounds good. Okay. So then I called Burton Cohen at the Desert Inn, and I said, listen, Frank wants to have Rickles open for the 77th birthday. And he says, geez, but he's under contract at the Nugget. I said, not if he doesn't want to be. I said, how do you feel about signing him to bring him as part of the family here at the Desert Inn? He said, oh, that would be terrific. We could use it as his inaugural engagement. And he said, well, how much a show does he get? And I figured, what the hell, I might as well aim for the fence. So I added $15,000 a show to what he was making more over at the Golden. Yeah, we could handle that.
Wow.
So I called Rickles. At this time, Joe Scandori, his longtime manager, had passed away about 2 months earlier. Don had no manager. And I said, listen, I got to talk to you about something. What? I said, well, Frank wants you to open for him at the Desert Inn for his 77th birthday. Yeah, but I got the thing at the Nugget. I said, no. And I told him about the deal. He said, no, you kidding? I said, no. And I talked to Burton Cohen, and he wants to make you part of the Desert Inn family, using that as the inaugural. Oh, my God, Tony, that's terrific. Jesus Christ. Oh, that's fantastic. He said, now, I got to ask you something. I said, yeah. He said, listen, I know Frank comes first. I said, no. He says, no. I said, no. Frank comes first, second, and third, Frank. So he says, okay, understood and agreed. Would you consider representing me too? I said, I'd be honored. That's how it started.
That is fantastic. And by the way, Fish, I got a great story. You know, Don Rickles is my favorite comedian that ever lived. And I got to see him at the Saban Theater. Tony made this happen. And I went backstage, met his whole family, his whole mishpucha, his grandkids. Tony was there, and Don, and I gave him a kiss on the head. And I said, have a great show. And he just crushed it. Here, I hope I'm not crossing the line. You know, when Frank and Don passed away, did you have a private moment with them? Did they say something to you about, thank you, Tonio, for everything you did? You know, something along those lines?
I'm privileged, and I put it that way because I truly feel that way. I had lunch with Frank the afternoon of the night that he passed. We didn't see it coming at all. I mean, he was having health issues, and he had retired from performing about 2.5 years before that. I was entertaining a friend of mine, Glenn Scarpelli, childhood actor.
Oh God, yeah.
One day at a time. He was my neighbor in my condo that I had, and he was moving to Sedona. He had bought a television station, and we were having a farewell dinner. And I got a call from Vine, Frank's longtime maid and gal Friday. And she said, you know, Frank is not doing too well. And I said, well, what's going on? And as she was talking to me, he fell back on the bed, and she's screaming. And I said, Vine, long story short, I met her at Cedars-Sinai. And 2 hours or so later, I literally was holding his hand as he drew his last breath.
Wow.
And it was
our last
communication was fight, Frank, fight. He says, I am, but I'm losing.
Oh, man. How old was Frank when he passed? How old?
82 and a half.
Wow.
Same age as my dad, who was also named Frank. Go figure.
Oh, wow.
Yeah.
He would want you to hold his hand. He would want you.
And with Don, as you know, Michael and I came up with the Dinner with Don concept, which we were able to shoot 13 episodes. And then Don started having some other health issues. And so we put a pin in shooting any more shows. And I had postponed a lot of his public performances to do the Dinner with Don stuff. And he was rallying. And so I said, now, Don, now that we have everything under control, he was having kidney issues, and we were able to take a dialysis machine. I was having his people taught how to use the machine, blah, 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 in preparation and going on the road. And I says, now listen, we have a couple of more Dinner with Don things that we have to shoot. I says, and then I'm going to come over, I said, and go through your act with you. I said, because the press knows that you are having health issues. The last thing we want is for you to get out there after not working so long and do a mediocre show. He said, oh, Tony, you're absolutely right. As a matter of fact, there are two other things that you can help me with my performance that I'm sure have suffered. He said, my high jumping and my pole vaulting.
Don was such a character.
So I gave him a kiss and I said, listen, this was on a Tuesday. I said, I'll see you Thursday. I'm going to come over. Okay. And at this point in time, because of his health issues, Barbara was a bit of a wreck, even though she was one of the strongest women I've ever known in my life. And whenever anything came up with the doctors with him, she would collapse in tears. And he was well aware of that. Okay, so now, this was on a Tuesday. He was rallying. And I said, I'll see you Thursday. And I got a call from Barbara around noon on Thursday. And she says, Tony, you still coming over today? I said, yeah, in about an hour and a half. Why? She said, well, Don's health is failing again. His kidneys are failing badly. She says, and I think you're going to have to help me set up hospice for him. And I said, oh, okay. And hung up the phone. And she called me back 10 minutes later. And she says, Tony, I got to tell you something. I said, what, Barbara? She said, Don, I guess, heard the resolution in my voice and finally stopped fighting. He passed away while we were on the phone.
Oh, wow.
Felt it was okay to leave, that she was not going to collapse.
Oh.
Now, I'll tell you something to change the attitude of what we're just discussing. As you know, I was a lead pallbearer at Frank's funeral, among other hats that I wore. And it was me and Steve Lawrence and Rickles and Sonny Golden, Frank's longtime business manager. And so after the service, it was a 2-day affair, but after the service, we're having some drinks, and I was in my head. It was a difficult time for me. And Rickles kept talking about how heavy the casket was. I said, Don, please, will you stop with that? Yeah, but Jesus Christ, the goddamn thing, I thought I was going to get hurt. I said, Don, please. And I'm thinking, how the hell can I get him to stop talking about this? And then I said, I got it. Yeah. I said, let me tell you something. He said, yeah, what? I said, who was the firewall between Frank and the wise guys the last 8 years or so of his life? He said, well, you were. I said, okay. He said, well, what does that mean? I said, well, I have to explain everything to you? He said, well, what are you talking about? I said, the reason the casket was so heavy, I said, we owed the wise guys in Chicago a favor. He says, yeah. I said, there were 2 other guys in the casket with him. For the rest of his life, he never asked me if that was true or I just made it up. But he stopped talking about how heavy a casket was.
Oh, my goodness. That's hilarious.
That's great.
You know, Don was on a show, I think you produced it on Spike TV, where Don was at a table and it was a tribute to him.
Yep.
I mean, Letterman, Scorsese, De Niro.
That was Dinner with Don. Yeah.
I'm sorry?
Billy Crystal.
Everybody was there.
Zach Galifianakis, Vince Vaughn, Billy Crystal, Sarah Silverman, Snoop Dogg.
Snoop Dogg. And
That one cracked me up. I was blown away. We were at
his
Chinese
90th
restaurant.
birthday party, right? It was his 90th birthday party.
That too. You're talking about the thing at the Apollo.
Yes.
Yeah, the tribute at the Apollo. Yeah. Don Misher and Casey Patterson put that together. Yeah, with me. That was a hell of a show.
Oh my goodness, was that
fantastic. And De Niro and Scorsese were hysterical. De Niro comes out and he says, "It's an honor for me. We redid the down front section of the Apollo up in Harlem, and so it looked like Vegas. And we put in a big booth where Don was sitting. And De Niro's opening line, he comes out, he says, I just want you to know, ladies and gentlemen, it's an honor for me to have been asked to be here at the Don Rickles Memorial." And he looks over at Rickles and he says, "Yeah, Don, you're dead. Lay down." And then Scorsese comes out and he says, "The production is really terrific." He says, "But if I were producing this, I'm not so sure I'd have an open casket. I don't know about that." Yeah, they were terrific.
I'll tell you something. Don was 90. He was weak. He wasn't his, of course, energetic self. But I'll tell you something. He had the zingers. He was unbelievable at that table. He went around the table to each guy and just absolutely annihilated him. And it was like, "Don, you're 90 years old. You still got it, kid." I watched it like 3 or 4 times. It was so much fun.
Yeah.
To see him happy with all his friends and around him, and what a great show! You really did well.
Yeah.
It was incredible.
Thank you.
Really, Tony.
Well, the dinner with Don thing, Eric. The dinner with Don thing. He was thrilled that I kept him working. Literally, Don passed away 1 month, almost 1 month to the day of what would have been his 91st birthday. And literally the weekend of his funeral, because it's something that he wanted, and I worked feverishly to make it happen. He wanted to end his career in Vegas back up on the Strip, even though we enjoyed being at the Orleans and everything. And I had made a deal. The weekend of his funeral, we were supposed to be opening at the Mirage, believe it or not. Wow. But at least he knows that I pulled it off because he was looking forward to it.
Sure. Fish, you wanted to say something?
Yeah, I have a statement about Rickles, and I have a question for Tony about Sinatra. I mean, I'm a big fan of all these comedy roasts, and they said Jeff Ross is the greatest roaster on Comedy Central. You go back and watch the Dean Martin roast and watch how just Don Rickles takes over the whole show. When he gets on there, you don't see a dry eye. Everyone's on the floor. I mean, please go on YouTube, which we're on right now, and watch Don Rickles perform these roasts. Sinatra, you brought up Scorsese, gentlemen, right? They just announced they casted Leonardo DiCaprio to play Frank Sinatra in the new Scorsese biopic, and then Jennifer Lawrence is going to play Ava Gardner. Can you see DiCaprio, Tonio, playing Sinatra?
I have a lot of respect for Leonardo DiCaprio. I personally, I would try to find. It's going to be difficult, even if DiCaprio. If I were producing it, let me put it that way, I would try to find someone like a Michael Guarnera, who is very, very talented, more than capable of doing it, but doesn't bring other personalities to the table. What I mean by that is DiCaprio has already played Howard Hughes and he's played other people. So instead of watching Leonardo trying to make like Frank and getting kind of caught up in that, you'd be watching an actor portraying Frank. I mean, I think he could probably pull it off. He's an extremely talented guy, and I had the privilege of meeting him once or twice, actually in Rickles' company. But it's not going to be an easy thing to do. As a matter of fact, I mean, I'm determined to turn my book into a limited dramatic series because there is just so much I want the world to get to know the Sinatra that I had the honor and privilege to know.
Can I show some pics of you? I got some great pics of you, Tonio, that Brad sent me, and Yeah,
they have?
let's go. Let's go through the timeline of
Did I have
Tony
numbers
hopping the
under my
sauna.
chin?
Hang on 1 second.
Wow.
Look at that.
That was at the Waldorf. When we had an evening at the Waldorf, I partnered with the Friars Club in New York, and we had an evening honoring Rickles in the Empire Room at the Waldorf Astoria.
Wow.
And I got to tell you a quick, funny story about that. Every Louis C.K., every comedian, Newhart was there, and Bob Saget, and a ton of comedians. And Joan Rivers gets up, God bless her. This is slightly politically incorrect, but it's funny. And she's following all these other comics, and she says, you know, what can I say about Don Rickles that's not already been said? She said, let me put it to you this way. Like Ellen DeGeneres' vagina, Don Rickles is gone where no man has gone before.
Oh, God. That's good. I love
and Saget, God bless him. Saget stood up. And you know, there was all kinds of food and everything. It was a whole evening. And Saget gets up and he says, yeah, ladies and gentlemen, in case you're wondering, yes, I am Jewish like the rest of the comedians that have been up here. He says, and because of my height, he says, they had to circumcise me 4 times. And by the way, enjoy the calamari. But everybody was there that evening performing. Diana Krall, and it was just a phenomenal. John Mayer, phenomenal. Bette Midler showed up at the end of the night. Billy Crystal. It was really Tony Bennett. It was a hell of an evening.
Tony, you have a memory like an elephant. Unbelievable.
Look at this one, Brad.
People say that, and I say, well, that's because I lived it. I wasn't told about it.
Oh my God! Oh, look at
that!
Look at
this photo. We were just about to get on the jet to fly to New York. Frank was being honored, given the Legends Award at the Grammys. That's what that is. Oh. And the funny thing is that the suitcase that I'm holding.
Yeah.
Because we were gonna be in New York for a week and a half. Barbara Sinatra, God love her. She had a complete schedule laid out of who she was having lunch with each day and who she was having dinner with each day. And she even laid out what outfits she was going to wear with the accompanying jewelry. And that's what's in that case, the accompanying jewelry.
That's great.
I didn't dare put it down on the runway.
No. That's true. A great story is everybody has to have a side hustle now, Tonio, in life, especially in show business. And I have had a side hustle for a long time. I'm a Lyft driver. So I got a call about maybe 2 months ago, and Tony knows this story. And I pick up this couple in Hollywood, and they say to me, I want to go to the resting place of Don Rickles. I go, excuse me? And they repeated it, and it was Forest Lawn, and we could not find Don and his family. I called Tony O, and he showed me and pointed right where, he told me where to go, and there they were. Beautiful corner where a bench is, and Larry, his son, is there, his mother-in-law, Barbara's there, Don's there. Just a beautiful setting, and these people were so excited. And the only one I could call is Tony O, who knew, and he knew exactly where Don was. Don's last place.
And ironically enough, it's a courtyard it's open to the public, but he's in the courtyard in the corner. But ironically enough, probably 80 to 100 yards away from where Don and Barbara and their son Larry and Barbara's mother are buried in the family plot. Lo and behold, Bob Saget was laid to rest right, not too far from where Don is.
Right there. Oh. Yeah. The comedy guys together. I love that. Tony, we have a segment on our show where we ask our guests this question. What was your first job? Not in show business. Your first job as a kid at McDonald's, whatever you did. What was the first job, a paying job you had or got?
The first job I had was I was teaching, giving music lessons, believe it or not, at age 17 to younger people. I was teaching 5 and 7 and 8-year-old kids how to play the piano. I was giving them my version of music theory because it's not as complicated as most music teachers make it. And it was really very rewarding for me to hear these kids being able to play and not necessarily all about reading music either. So that's that. And then at age 17, because the drinking age back in those days was 18, I had a phony driver's license that said I was 18 so that I could start performing in nightclubs. And I was doing that. And when I graduated high school, to please my dad, I got a job working in a defense plant by day, and I was playing clubs by night. That was the beginning of my life.
What advice would you give a young performer coming into show business, comedian, actor, musician? What advice would you give that person, a man or a woman?
Learn as much about the business as you possibly can, because unfortunately there seems to be an attitude, even among representatives, agents, and the younger people, that show business began when they got out of college. Learn as much about the business as you possibly can. And the biggest thing that you need to do is believe in your own talent. If you don't believe in you, how do you expect other people to believe in you?
Amen.
You have to believe in yourself. Absolutely.
Totally. And never
Tony,
give up.
I got some more picks. If you want to just give me a,
let's do
sure.
it.
Look at that.
That's me at age 19. That's when I first started hanging out, and I was even beginning at age 20. I was performing at Jilly's, 256 West 52nd Street. It's now a club called the Russian Samovar. They have barely changed the way it was when Jilly owned it, and it's right next door to what at the time was the Alvin Theater. Now it's the Neil Simon Theater.
Yes. Yeah. Wow.
Hey, Tony, who's that? I can't. Who's the guy in the middle?
Yeah.
The guy in the middle is a childhood friend of mine. He was a hell of a piano player. He's from Naples, actually, originally. His name is Les Stanko. And he happened to be with me the night that Frank agreed finally to take a photograph with me, a few months into my friendship with him. And that's taken out in front of the club, because you didn't dare take out a camera inside Jilly's. It had a very eclectic population, that place. There'd be a senator at one table, Van Cliven at another table, and as Jilly used to put it, 20 years of good behavior at another table. So you camera inside the club. So we went out front to take a picture, and Les jumped in between the two of us, and that's where Frank is teasing with the guy that took the picture. And he said, "Look at this, the kid wants to take a picture with me," and he's standing over there. That's why his hand is out like that. But that's the first of many. But
hey, Tony, did Frank have a tailor that traveled with him? Always impeccably dressed. Did he wear Armani? What did he wear?
All of his clothes, including some of his underwear, everything was custom made.
Just like Fish. Fish has his underwear custom made.
Yeah, there you go. There you go. And right down to his shoes, his Mary Janes that he used to wear, the patent leather shoes with his tuxedo, and his shoes, his boots, everything was custom made. His shirts. So, and Vine she was a wonderful, wonderful woman. She was Creole and an absolute sweetheart, and she took care of all his clothes. She took care of his medicines and stuff like that. She was his gal Friday.
Tony, is it true that when he drank?
To give you an idea about the dedication that this woman had for him, Frank had he had a light case of the flu. The weekend that her father passed away down near New Orleans, and she didn't attend her own father's funeral because she wanted to make sure Frank got the care he deserved.
Oh,
Wow.
wow.
Yeah, that's
We
rough.
have a couple more questions before you wrap this up. Fish, you go
Sure.
first.
Yeah, really quick, just from the bartender's standpoint, is it true or is it bullshit that Frank liked to have the ice cubes in his Jack Daniels in round balls? He didn't care? Okay.
I don't
Okay.
know where that came from.
All right. My two questions is this. First of all, I want to promote your book. Can you please show your book? Can you tell us
Sure.
where people can get the book?
This-
It's an incredible book.
This is
Yeah.
the book.
Okay.
And it's
Sinatra and Me.
In the wee small hours, Tony hop in the sauna.
That's fantastic.
And,
you can get it on Amazon. Where can we get this book?
It's still available on Amazon. Yeah, both in hardcover and paperback.
It's a wonderful book, everybody.
And I'll give you a clue how popular evidently it is. Simon and Schuster sent me this about 6 months ago. It's been for sale in the United States, Canada, South America, Japan, Australia, Great Britain, Germany, Spain, and Estonia.
Oh my
Estonia.
God.
Can you believe it? Estonia.
Yeah.
Wow.
Okay.
Are you going to make that into a movie? Is it a TV series?
I am determined through Winbrook, our production, Winbrook Entertainment. I want to turn it into a limited dramatic series because when I delivered the original manuscript to Simon and Schuster, it was 155,000 words, and they said we love every bit of it. And even that, there's so much that I didn't tell, even in that version of the manuscript. But they said to me, Tony, we want to try and keep the book somewhere at around 300 pages so we could keep it within a certain price point. So I said, okay, so what do you need me to do? You have to return the manuscript. Can you whittle it down to about 100 to 110,000 words? So I took out 1/3 of the original manuscript that I delivered. Wow. And even in that, as I said, there was so much that I didn't tell. There are a lot of things that I would not tell. For a variety of reasons. Some of them were far too personal that Frank shared with me, and I would not violate that confidence.
That's kind of like this podcast, because we are going to bring you back, because I know there's so much more you can tell us about your life with Don Rickles and Frank Sinatra.
Thank you.
The last question I have for you, and this is a great one. You said that I could ask you this question. Can you show me what Frank left you?
Well, over my shoulder, that is Frank's gold record of My Way. That he gave me that as a thank you for taking care of something personal, very sensitive that he wanted me to do. Before we left the compound in 1995, which he reluctantly sold, he agreed. Barbara got him to agree to sell it. That's a whole other story. We were sitting out by the pool. It was 3 or 4 in the morning, as usual. And he said, listen, I was wondering if you would do me a favor. I said, sure. He said, I'll meet you in the theater. I got to go in the house and get something. He came out into the theater and he had this valise. And he said, the contents of this valise are things that I've been saving since the 30s. He said, and everything in here predates my relationship with Barbara. He said, and I want, when the appropriate time presents itself, meaning after I'm gone, and after my will is signed, sealed, and delivered and executed, I would like to get this to my blood, my children, and my first wife. And I said, fine, I'll take care of it, no big deal. And he opened it up and described what this was, where it came, how it came to be, everything from diamond encrusted watches to a plastic kazoo that little Nancy gave him when she was a little girl, all kinds of stuff. Uh-huh. And that's when, as I said, he was a fan of my singing, and he knew how much I lamented giving up my career, predominantly because I really enjoyed doing it, for one thing. And the other part of it was that I lamented that I would not be able to earn a gold record as a performer. As a producer, yes, and I have earned gold records as a producer. So he sent me, after I went back to LA, a package arrived, and it had the address from Rancho Mirage. I just spent 2 weeks with him. What the hell is this? I open it up, and there was a note, and it said, Tony, this is for you. There's no discussion. Love, Frank. And not only was it a gold record, it was his gold record of My Way.
Oh.
Okay. And so after I regained my composure, I called the house, and it was about 3 p.m. He was just getting up to have his breakfast. And Vine picked up the phone. I said, Vine.
3 p.m.
I said, Vine, is the gorilla up? That's what we lovingly called him sometimes. She says, oh, yeah, he's having his breakfast. I said, would you please tell him I'm on the phone? She says, sure. So she pulled the phone away from her ear. And again, I'm going to clean up the language. She said, Mr. S? Yes, sweetheart. Tony O's on the phone. He wants to talk to you. So I hear Frank chuckling, and he says, tell him to read the goddamn note again. That's not the word he used, but yeah. And he wouldn't talk to me, wouldn't get on the phone. The other thing was that he said to me, for years I have felt that you are family, almost like another son to me. He says, and I want to give you something really special. And he pushed this jewelry box across the table. And he said, the contents of that jewelry box, he says, this now belongs to you. And I said, okay. And he said, go ahead, open it up. And it was the pinky ring, literally the one he's wearing in the photograph on the cover of my book. And he said, I want you to know, Tony, that is the original that I wore on my left hand until I married Barbara. And then I put a wedding ring on my left hand. He says, but that ring wouldn't fit over the pinky on my right hand because I broke my hand doing Manchurian Candidate, and his right hand was like that. And so he had a replica made of the original by Bulgari, and that's what he wore for the rest of his life. And he gave this to me.
Wow. There it is, right there, Tony. Oh my goodness, there it is. The pinky ring. Wow. You kissed the pinky ring. You kissed the ring.
To lighten the subject a little bit, and again, I will try to do this as carefully as I can. He started to get a bit emotional, and I'm thinking, okay, if he loses it, I'm going to lose it. That's not going to be pretty. How do I lighten up this? So I came up with an idea, and I said, Frank, can I ask you a personal question? You can ask me anything. And I took the ring out of the box, and I'm holding it. And I said, so let me get this right. I said that this ring was on your left hand through all those years with Lauren Bacall and Juliet Prowse and Victoria Principal. And I went through this whole litany of names. And he said, yeah, why? And I went like this. He says, you crazy. Made you laugh.
That's great. Tony O, this has been a treat. One of a kind. You're a special guy. I'm so blessed to have you and call you a friend. And
thank you,
I will say this. That's Eric Fish Schneider. I'm Brad Grunny Grunberg, a.k.a. Snacks. And that is Tony O, the legend, performer, manager to Don Rickles and the great Frank Sinatra. Thanks for being on the show. Number 58, Fat Fish is in the books. Fish, there's only one thing to do, I think. Have Dave Linden take us home. Thank you, Tony. We love you.
Thank you, guys. It's been a privilege and an honor. Thank you very much. I appreciate it.
Nice to meet you. And if you're ever in Vegas, look me up.
I will definitely do that.
We're going to have you back, Tony. Thank you, sir.
Thank you. Be well, guys.
You too.
You've been listening to the Fat Fish Podcast, heard on all your favorite platforms. Until next time.
Danny, we love you, Tony.
You've been listening to